The sky above the Exelthar homeworld was painted in hues of deep purple and silver, a breathtaking sight that once symbolized the Empire's power. But tonight, it was different. Tonight, the sky burned with the reflection of something terrifying, something unstoppable. High above the planet, hanging in the void like a silent executioner, was the Indomitable. The massive human warship, black as the abyss, loomed over the Exelthar capital like a god of destruction. It did not move. It did not send demands. It simply waited, letting fear spread through the streets below. Panic had already consumed the Exelthar government. Inside the Grand Hall, the High Chancellor stood frozen, his many eyes locked onto the holographic display of the warship. The defensive fleets had already been obliterated in the battle above. Warships that had served the Empire for centuries were now nothing more than floating wreckage, drifting lifelessly through space. The humans had not just won, they had dominated. And now they were here to finish what they had started. The Chancellor turned toward his advisors, but no one spoke. There was nothing left to say. Everyone knew the truth: they were about to die. Far above, on the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Daniel Reeve stood with his arms crossed, watching the planet below through the reinforced viewport. His face showed no emotion, but his heart was heavy with the weight of history. The Exelthar had erased a human colony 200 years ago, wiping out millions of innocent lives as if they were nothing more than insects. They believed that humanity was weak, that humans would never fight back. They were wrong. Humanity had not only survived, but it had thrived in the shadows, building, preparing, and waiting for this very moment. Now, the time for waiting was over. "Sir," a voice broke the silence. Commander Avery stood beside him, her expression unreadable. "All weapons are locked onto the capital. We're ready." For a moment, Captain Reeves said nothing. He stared down at the planet, remembering the images of the long-lost human colony, the ruined cities, the lifeless bodies, the way the Exelthar had laughed at humanity's weakness. His fingers tightened into a fist before he finally gave the order. Fire. The Indomitable's main cannon, a planet cracker railgun, hummed with power. A glow of electric blue energy spiraled along its surface, growing brighter and brighter until, in an instant, it unleashed hell. The shot tore through the atmosphere like a spear from the heavens, moving faster than the eye could follow. The moment it hit the surface, there was silence, a deadly, eerie silence. And then, everything erupted. The explosion was unlike anything the Exelthar had ever witnessed. The ground split apart like broken glass, a shockwave tearing across the entire planet. The blast reached the Grand Hall within seconds, reducing the once proud building to nothing but fire and dust. Millions of voices screamed at once, their cries vanishing in the roar of destruction. The city was no more. The capital of the Exelthar Empire had ceased to exist. The devastation did not stop there. The impact sent massive tremors racing through the planet's core. Cracks spread like veins of doom, and the very foundation of the world began to crumble. Fires consumed the land, oceans boiled into steam, and the sky turned black with ash. The homeworld of the Exelthar, the heart of their empire, was dying. In mere minutes, everything they had built over centuries was reduced to ruins and fire. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Reeve watched with cold, calculated silence. The mission was complete. There was no joy in this destruction, only justice. The Exelthar had made their choice centuries ago, and now they faced the consequences. He turned to his crew. "We're done here. Set course for the next target." As the Indomitable turned away, leaving the crumbling world behind, a final message was broadcasted across the entire sector. It echoed through every communication channel, reaching every empire, every race that had once mocked humanity. The voice was calm, yet unshakable, carrying the weight of an entire species rising from the ashes. Humanity is not weak. We are not prey. We are the storm. And with that, the warship vanished into the stars, leaving behind nothing but the ghost of a fallen empire and the legend of the warship that changed the galaxy forever. The destruction of the Exelthar homeworld sent shockwaves across the galaxy. What was once the most feared empire in the sector had been reduced to ash and silence in a single strike. Entire fleets had crumbled before they could even put up a fight. Cities, once symbols of power, were now nothing but molten ruins. Billions of Exelthar were dead, their screams lost in the fires that consumed their world. But the worst part wasn't the destruction, it was the message left behind. A single transmission, sent across every communication channel, now echoed in the minds of every species. Humanity is not weak. We are not prey. We are the storm. Those words carried a weight that no one could ignore. Fear spread like a disease. The Exelthar had ruled with arrogance for centuries, believing themselves invincible. If they could fall in a single night, what hope did anyone else have? Across the stars, governments scrambled to react. In the halls of the Gorvani Dominion, leaders whispered among themselves, their reptilian faces filled with unease. They'd always thought of humans as nothing more than a minor species, barely worth their attention. Now, they were questioning everything. If the Exel, their greatest rivals, had fallen so easily, what chance did the Gorvani have? On the planet Velsharan, the insectoid Zephyr Collective held an emergency council. Their hive mind, usually calm and logical, was now flooded with fear. The humans had achieved something that no species had ever dared to attempt. They had not just won a battle, they had erased an empire from existence. The Zephyr, who had once dismissed humans as primitive, now saw them for what they truly were, a threat unlike any other. Meanwhile, the surviving Exelthar fleets, scattered and leaderless, begged for help. Their once proud generals sent desperate messages to old allies, pleading for aid, but the responses were cold and distant. No one wanted to be next. No one wanted to anger the indomitable. The great warship had disappeared into the void, but its presence lingered like a shadow over every planet, every station, every fleet in the sector. The Exelthar survivors realized too late that they were no longer feared. They were hunted. And then the shift began. Slowly at first, but then all at once, alliances began to crumble. Species that had once sworn loyalty to the Exelar Empire now turned their backs on them. Old allies cut off communications, pretending they had never been involved. The T-Vora Ascendancy, a longtime trading partner, suddenly declared neutrality, refusing to shelter any Exelthar refugees. Even worse, some former allies took the opposite approach. They saw an opportunity. They realized that with the Exelthar weakened, this was their chance to take what was left. Fleets once commanded by Exelthar officers now turned their weapons on their former masters, seizing planets, stations, and resources for themselves. The mighty Exelthar Empire, which had once crushed rebellions with ease, now found itself on the receiving end of betrayal. In the far reaches of space, hidden beneath the surface of a barren moon, a secret meeting was held. Representatives from multiple species gathered in a dimly lit chamber, their voices low, their movements tense. The topic was simple, yet terrifying. The destruction of the Exelthar had shown that humanity was no longer a species to be ignored. They were not diplomats. They were not negotiators. They were hunters, and now the rest of the galaxy was starting to feel like prey. Some argued for peace, saying that humanity had only acted out of revenge, that their war was personal. But others weren't so sure. What if the humans weren't done? What if they saw this as the beginning of something bigger? What if they had more warships hidden in the dark, waiting for their next target? Fear made decisions for them. By the time the meeting ended, a silent agreement had been made. Humanity had to be watched, controlled, and, if necessary, stopped before they became an unstoppable force. But stopping them wouldn't be easy. Unlike the Exelthar, who had ruled through brute force, humanity was unpredictable. No one knew how many warships they had. No one knew where their fleets were hidden. No one even knew how they had managed to build a warship as powerful as the indomitable. They had come from the shadows, struck down an empire, and disappeared again. The galaxy had always underestimated humans, and now that ignorance had come back to haunt them. On a distant human station, deep in uncharted space, Captain Daniel Reeves stood in the command center of a hidden fleet. Around him, dozens of ships sat in silence, their their dark hulls blending into the void. These were not ordinary ships. They were the future of humanity's expansion, each one built in secret, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. The destruction of the HFY homeworld was only the first step. Humanity had no intention of stopping. They had spent centuries being ignored, being dismissed, being seen as weak. Now, they had the power to reshape the galaxy. And they would. Across the sector, a new unwritten rule settled into the minds of every alien race: do not cross the humans. Do not make them your enemy. Because if you do, you won't live to regret it. The Indomitable had done what no other warship in history had ever accomplished. It had erased an empire. The HFY homeworld was now nothing more than a burning graveyard, its once great cities reduced to smoldering ruins. The echoes of its destruction had spread across the galaxy, leaving entire civilizations in a state of fear and disbelief. No distress calls had been answered. No reinforcements had arrived. The HFY, once proud and untouchable, had been utterly annihilated. But as the fires still raged on the surface of the dead world, something just as strange and terrifying was happening above it. The Indomitable was leaving. And more than that, it was disappearing. Across every observation station, every long-range scanner, and every distant warship watching from the shadows, the same unsettling report came in. The warship was vanishing from their sensors. One moment, it was there, a massive, unstoppable force hanging in space like a dark omen, and the next, it was simply gone. No jump signature. No heat trails. No trace of its engines. It was as if the warship had never been there at all. Panic spread instantly. The destruction of the HFY had been horrifying, but the sudden disappearance of the Indomitable was something else entirely. Governments that had been preparing for the possibility of war with humanity now found themselves facing a new, terrifying question. Where was the warship now? Deep inside the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Daniel Reeves stood in silence, watching as the warship moved through the fabric of space in a way that no alien race could understand. The ship had been designed not just to fight, but to vanish, to become a legend before anyone could learn how to stop it. The same technology that had made it impervious to other weapons also allowed it to slip into the void, hiding in the dark corners of the universe where no one could find it. There was no celebration on board. No cheers of victory. Every crew member knew what they had done, and they all knew one simple truth: they could never return home. The moment they had fired that first shot, the Indomitable had ceased to be a simple warship. It had become something more. Something mythical. Across the galaxy, rumors spread like wildfire. Some said the warship had been destroyed in the aftermath of its own attack. Others believed that it had never existed at all, that the destruction of the HFY had been carried out by a force even greater than humanity. The most terrifying theory, however, was the one whispered in the dark corridors of alien war councils. What if the Indomitable was still out there, watching, waiting, ready to strike again? No one knew when or if it would return, and that uncertainty was far more terrifying than the warship itself. Meanwhile, on a distant world far beyond the reach of any known empire, a hidden facility came to life. Beneath the surface, buried under layers of rock and reinforced steel, hundreds of engineers and scientists worked in silence, their eyes fixed on the massive structures before them. The blueprints of the Indomitable were already obsolete. The warship had been the beginning, not the end. Humanity had no intention of stopping. The galaxy believed the warship had disappeared, but the truth was far more dangerous. It had multiplied. The universe struggled to make sense of what had happened. One unspoken rule settled into the minds of every alien race: never underestimate humanity again. Because even though the Indomitable had vanished into the void, one thing was certain: it would return when the time was right. And when it did, there would be no warning. Only the storm. The galaxy had gone silent. The HFY homeworld, once a beacon of power and dominance, was nothing more than a dead rock, still burning from the wrath of humanity. The mighty fleets of the HFY, ships that had once ruled the stars, were now scattered wreckage, drifting lifeless in the cold void. No one had seen the attack coming. No one had believed that humanity, a species long dismissed as insignificant, could wipe an empire off the map in a single strike. But they had. And now, across every corner of known space, a single message echoed, repeating over and over through every transmission channel, on every frequency, refusing to be silenced. We are not weak. We are your reckoning. The message was short, simple, but it carried a weight heavier than any fleet, any weapon, any empire. Every species that heard it felt a deep, instinctual fear, a feeling buried in their very DNA. The Exelthar had fallen, but the war was not over because this was never just a war. This was humanity's arrival. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Daniel Reeves stood in the dim light, watching the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful civilization in the sector. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. Victory had come at a cost, one that could never be undone. His crew, hardened soldiers and brilliant minds, stood in silence, knowing the truth. They had sent a message to the stars, but it was more than just words. It was a warning, a declaration that humanity had stepped out of the shadows. And now, the galaxy had a choice: acknowledge humanity as an equal or prepare for war. The response was immediate. Across hundreds of worlds, governments fell into chaos. The Gorvani Dominion, a proud and warlike species, held emergency war councils, their leaders screaming at each other over whether they should strike humanity first or try to make peace before it was too late. The insectoid Zephyr Collective, once uninterested in human affairs, now mobilized entire fleets in silence, knowing that their hive worlds were vulnerable. Even the mighty T-Vora Ascendancy, an ancient race that had watched the rise and fall of empires, now feared that they might be next. The balance of power had been shattered in a single night. The galaxy had been forced to accept a truth they had long ignored. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was now the storm on the horizon. But fear does not lead to peace. It leads to desperation, to panic, to war. Across distant systems, fleets began moving. Spies were sent to locate the Indomitable, to find out where it had come from and how many more warships like it existed. No one believed that humanity had built only one. There had to be more. Hidden somewhere in the dark, waiting. The Indomitable itself was already gone. It had disappeared into the void, its location unknown, leaving only destruction and its final message behind. The warship had become a ghost, a nightmare whispered among terrified leaders. Some believed it had left the galaxy, vanishing into deep space never to return. Others feared it was still watching, waiting for the next enemy to make a move. And then there were the most terrifying theories, the ones that suggested the Indomitable was only the beginning. In the farthest reaches of space, on the frozen surface of an uncharted world, factories worked in silence. Deep underground, hidden from every known sensor and scan, massive warships were being built, ships that made the Indomitable look small in comparison. The galaxy had only seen the first strike, the opening move. Humanity had no intention of stopping. ASF. The stars turned and time moved forward. The message continued to echo across the galaxy. Some species tried to block it, jamming frequencies, scrambling signals. But it always returned. It found its way into secure military channels, into classified government meetings, into the minds of those who had once laughed at humanity. There was no stopping it. We are not weak. We are your reckoning. And every being who heard those words knew one thing with absolute certainty: humanity was coming.